This week, the agenda appraised the autonomous automobile, counted on new forms of currency, and evaluated emerging markets. The agenda's Week in Review begins with the politics of Generation Y. Let's go around the table. Idil, let's hear some words that you would use to describe people who are involved in politics.
Inauthentic and short-sighted.
Inauthentic because what?
They're packaged. They fit themselves into a mold, and they come across rehearsed and scripted, which makes it come across as inauthentic, and short-sighted because all of them think in a 4-year term, and it's all about getting reelected, not about building infrastructure or having a bold vision for the future of this country or city. There's none of that.
Is there a politician in the country today that you look at and say, you know what? They seem not too packaged. They seem pretty authentic.
Naheed Nenshi.
Mayor of Calgary.
Yes. But
right.
Sometimes if I pay too much attention, then I feel like he's doing that on purpose.
He's doing what on purpose?
The whole being like and cool thing. You know, because he's aware of it now, right?
Yeah.
So now I feel I'm starting to do a double take and be like, now I feel like this is an act. It's no longer the authentic, cool guy.
Well,
Calgary.
Even when he's authentic and cool, he can't win. You still are suspicious of why he's being that way.
Yes. This is what our Canadian democracy has done to us.
What's that?
We have a very authentic mayor in Toronto, for better or for worse, I
Yes,
think.
you do.
Yeah, I would agree.
So you're okay on his
No,
type
not at
of
all. I just
authenticity.
to that point, to the point of authenticity. I think we rail against inauthenticity, rightfully so. But I think authentic isn't a virtue in and of itself. It's authentically good, right? Authentically bad is no better than inauthentic.
Okay, Omer, do we have a truly authentic politician in this country today that you would identify?
Oh, I gotta go with the hometown hero, Hazel McCallion, the mayor of Mississauga. She's been around for a long time, and I mean, there's the scandal, and don't want to get into that. But you ask most people who live in that city, it's growing really fast, and they're content. They're happy with the condition of the roads and their taxes and life in the city. I'd agree, Mayor of Calgary is another one. And there's some federal politicians. I think Justin Trudeau might be moving in that direction where he's trying to be authentic and genuine. Whether that's going to bode well for him in the election next year.
Well, this is where I'm going to quibble with you. I don't know that you could try to be authentic and genuine. Either you are or you aren't. I mean, that's part of it.
Yeah, but you have to be packaged to an extent. I mean, look, this is a democracy. You have to win an election. If you don't win an election, you can't get anything done. And to a certain extent, you have to, do some marketing ploys and be a little Machiavellian and play the game.
Just tell me your ideas. Have a conversation with me.
Yeah, but I mean, look, if you don't win an election, or you have to be a little bit of Frank Underwood, right? You have to get the. You have
no,
to.
don't ever be like Frank Underwood.
You have to.
35 minutes in, we finally get a House of Cards reference. All right, good stuff.
You have to get the political machinations done when you win an election and when you're in the House. That's the nature of parliamentary democracy. Politics is by definition divisive. I might not agree with you on position X, and we're going to sit down, we're going to have a disagreement about it, and we're going to take it to the people, right? And that's the nature of the game. And you don't have to play too dirty. I mean, you're going to have to play.
There's obviously, Matt, not a politician in the country or the province who moved you enough to get you to cast an X on a ballot.
You're looking deep into my soul.
I can tell. But do you look, I mean, this is now 2.5 years later since the last election. The last federal election anyway. Do you see any politicians in this country who are authentic?
Not at the moment. I would echo kind of the same sentiment. It's disingenuous. There's too much gamery, and I get a lot of gobbledygook from kind of what politicians, or when I hear them speaking or I see their messaging, because I think it's very different than running a business and being a CEO and having the buck stop at you, and things are going to work or they're not going to work, but you're going to move forward either way. And instead, it's more of a cautious strategy game of chess. It's less about saying the right thing and more about not saying the wrong thing to make sure you're scooping everyone in off of the margins. Mm-hmm. And for me, I'd like to see a little bit more balls.
I think you mean. What? Authenticity.
Authenticity. Or just someone who's willing to be a little bit more straightforward and put it on the line, whether it's going to work or not.
Got it. You were going to say?
No, I was going to say, there's that old saying that a gaffe is when a politician tells the truth. And the media doesn't really help either, because when there are gaffes, right, they're just replayed and looped and discussed and analyzed over and over and over again. And that makes politicians very, very, very cautious, and I don't blame them.
However you want to characterize the interest that your parents have and have had in politics, do you want the same kind of politics, or do you want a different kind of politics? And if it's different, what do you want?
I think it's the voter behavior that has changed. I think my generation has less time. We are squeezed for time. We study longer, work harder, and we're just always on the go. So I think the disengagement is just out of a lifestyle that we can no longer afford. So I would like to be more engaged in politics. I would like to be able to follow it more, but I just feel like the current lifestyle that we're building is not gonna enable that. And I feel like nothing will change, however, if I don't become more engaged and if I don't advocate for my generation to be looked after by the current status quo.
Brady.
I think that the whole playbook for how the parties approach people is written for the boomers, right? Because it's largely boomers that are in power right now. They know how to speak to their own demographic, and I think that is a core problem with it, because they're also very stuck in their ways. They want to retire. They want to have that comfortable place to go to, and they grew up with, I'm turning 28 this month. And at this point in time in my parents' life, they'd be buying a house, they'd be like thinking about having kids. It's a very different thing than where we are now, given the economy that they set up, given the rules that they've been playing by.
So you
over
want
the
a
course
different
of
politics
time.
from
Oh,
your
absolutely,
folks. You
absolutely.
Do. Matt, how about you?
I think it has to be different. It has to change. My ask would be, I turn out to stuff where there's a social pressure in my peer group to go and do things, and there's a level of discussion in that peer group that encourages me to go and source out further information and explore issues myself to form an opinion. So my ask would be, I don't have that now in my peer group. I'm always open to a conversation. So for the hyper-political people, when you're having a conversation with someone who maybe doesn't get it, have it be more of an exploration as opposed to a regurgitation.
Approach gently, as opposed to with a sledgehammer.
I'm not ready for prepackaged arguments to be thrown at me. I want to explore and feel around and have it be less of a political conversation and approach it more like a scientific dialogue, where you talk to a physicist, and you're not a physicist. They don't have the expectation that you would have an understanding of their subject matter expertise, and you get to play with ideas, and it's about testing and challenging ideas and hypothesis as opposed to reinforcing a package of party ideals.
Just before going to Ottawa, let's check out the BRICS by number here and share some of these numbers from the IMF with our viewers. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, as of last year, together comprised 3 billion people, a gross domestic product of more than 16 trillion American dollars, an estimate of $4 trillion in combined foreign reserves. They have held 4 annual summits, with a 5th to be held in Durban, South Africa, later this month. Let's go to Glenn Hodgson first in Ottawa on this. Did the coming together of this group do anything actually? I mean, it's a nice acronym, but did it actually do anything to boost their respective economies?
Steve, I think it was really symbolic. The naming of the BRICS, the fact that we're now focusing on emerging markets, even the name emerging markets says that these are countries in ascension. They're growing more rapidly. They're lifting people out of poverty into the middle class. So yeah, I think it had a huge contributing factor, for example, for things like global commodity prices, which have benefited Canada over the last 10 years. Demand for commodities very strong in China and the other emerging market countries. It really is symbolic for me of a structural change in how the world works. When I was at the IMF representing Canada 30 years ago, we didn't even talk about emerging markets. We talked about heavily indebted, impoverished, developing countries, and they were all problem cases. Now they're the future. So I really think it's managed to change the conversation away from this focus on the aging industrial countries of Western Europe, North America, Japan, really opening up the whole global conversation.
Mark, you travel to these countries. More symbolism here, or the real deal in terms of economic development?
Oh, I think they represent a lot of economic development for different reasons in each of those countries. And so it's a useful way to focus our attention from the point of view of investors, it seems to me. I think the BRICS terminology was coined by a Goldman Sachs chief economist, and I think he was thinking of it more in terms of grouping countries where foreign investors might want to stick their money. And from that point of view, there was a useful, I think, grouping. So obviously there are differences between the countries, but you can clearly see that Brazil in the 90s took a turn towards economic development, to tremendous structural reforms, to embracing large portion of its population that it hadn't embraced before. South Africa, the same thing. And, there's a lot more trade and contact between South Africa and Brazil that we don't even talk about, and even outside of the BRICS context. So you can see it in Russia. Yeah, you can see it. Obviously, we've talked about it in China. I have a very good Canadian friend who lives in Shanghai, and if I ever want to be on the phone on Skype for too long, I say anything critical about China, and he'll talk my head off, telling me about how democratic it is and how market-oriented it is at the local level. So, no, I mean, clearly these are important things. I mean, you can go too far with it, though. Part of what I think sometimes is we made too much of the BRICS on the way up, and we're probably making too much of their decline in the last year and a half or so. And when we get to the mints, I'll probably say the same thing. We're now getting a little bit too excited about them, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
Hold off on the mints. We'll get to the mints in a second. Here we go. If Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey get their act together, some of them could match Chinese-style double-digit rates between 2003 and 2008. They all have geographical positions that should be an advantage as patterns of world trade change. For example, Mexico is next door to the U.S., but also Latin America. Indonesia is in the heart of Southeast Asia, but also has deep connections with China. As we all know, Turkey is in both the West and the East. Nigeria is not really similar in this regard for now, partly because of Africa's lack of development, but it could be in the future if African countries stop fighting and trade with each other. This might, in fact, be the basis for the Mint countries developing their own economic political club, just as the BRIC countries did. One of the biggest surprises of the whole BRIC thing for me. I can smell the possibility of a Mint club already. Craig Alexander is, he wants to run off to the showers already because he's sickened at how dirty this is making him feel. But anyway, Simon, is there a benefit to a Mint club?
Well, it's a very refreshing acronym. I think that the thing there is, obviously, there was a need to find something new, given that the BRICS story now had, after 12, 13 years, with all due respect, had done pretty well. And at the time, I think that Jim O'Neill in 2001 was trying to highlight the fact that emerging markets are there and are, coming up and going to grow further and stronger. And at the time, it was just the right marketing tool, first of all, but at the same time, this was an extensive study about emerging markets, what they will look like in 10, 20, 30 years' time. It wasn't just some sort of a tool to say, look, invest in these things, we're an investment bank. There was an extensive study on this, on the outlook. And I think that those countries, the BRIC story has done very well and has highlighted to the rest of the world, the so-called developed world, that emerging markets are out there and are to be taken seriously.
Craig, you got to help me with this because, admittedly, I may be looking at this more through a political lens as opposed to a business lens. Tens of thousands of people have been killed in Mexico over the drug wars over the last decade. Indonesia, we had somebody in here in that chair last week talking about the human rights violations that happen in Indonesia to this day. People who are not of the state-sanctioned religions are in big trouble. They can get arrested for nothing. Nigeria, we know, is one of the most corrupt countries on earth. Very difficult to do business there. Turkey, okay, different story. Why does anybody want to do business in any of these places? It sounds miserable.
Okay, so I already told you I hate acronyms.
You hate the acronym to begin with, right.
But I do believe that emerging markets are going to experience a very large increase in their share of the global economy over the next 20 years. And as mentioned, the report that came up with this acronym was really looking out, like if you look out 2-3 decades from now, where is their potential? And if you look at the statement you read, it was filled with could do this, might become, right?
If.
So there was potential, right? So I think the answer is, I can also find lots of other countries that are emerging that actually have an awful lot of potential that actually aren't in that acronym. And so in the long run, I think that Canada is going to have to go global for growth. We're only 3% of the world economy. We can benefit from increased trade diversification. But I think one of the challenges when you throw around acronyms is it also can give you an idea of like, okay, so we should go out and buy Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, Turkey right now. And the problem with that is, 2 of those countries are actually part of what was dubbed the fiscal five, or the fragile five, that where the country's markets have just recently started to worry more about, right? In other words, the Indonesia and Turkey are facing some very serious challenges in the near term. So a lot depends on your time horizon. So I think the main message, and I think this is coming from all the panelists, is that, boy, there's going to be a lot of potential in the emerging market world, but there's also a lot of hurdles, right? And there's a lot of challenges. And a lot like Japan, where Japan was, a hugely powerful economic powerhouse in the late 80s, and then, they could have achieved a lot more, but then they had a massive real estate bubble. They made major policy errors, and it ended up being, stagflation or stagnation for the better part of a couple of decades. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there was potential there. They could have been on a different path if they'd managed to work through some of the challenges they had through their economic growth. And the real fundamental question with these emerging economies is, what's the path are they going to take? And I would take up Mark's point. I guarantee you this isn't going to be smooth.
I still can't get over this clip that I'm about to show you guys, but let's take a look at this anyway. Here is something you won't believe. Roll tape.
%95 of my vision is gone. I'm well past legally blind. You lose your timing in life, everything takes you much longer. There are some places that you cannot go, there are some things that you really cannot do. Where this would change my life is to give me the independence and the flexibility to go the places I both want to go and need to go when I need to do those things.
I know seeing is supposed to be believing, but I'm still not sure I believe what I just saw. A self-driving car. Is this here?
I'd believe it a lot better if the driver could see, but that's just me. The technology is obviously here. Google Car does work, and quite a bit of that technology is actually in today's cars as we speak.
David?
It also helps that he's in a nice sunny climate and everything else. It's really interesting. I've driven a lot of high-end cars lately, and they use some autonomous features like adaptive cruise control that senses how far you are behind the car in front of you and keeps that distance. And I haven't had one make it to Ottawa and back in a winter snowstorm yet without malfunctioning.
Right.
So I'm not sure. In perfect conditions, I believe the technology is here. How it's going to respond to snow, salt, and sand on our Canadian roads?
No, we get it. Brian, it's not here yet, but how far away is that?
Well, it's an exciting time to be an engineer, so we love solving problems. There's certainly challenges in front of us, though. It's under research. We're trying to build blocks of technology as they're saying, that enable us. And it's in an active safety format. So we're trying to save lives, actively have the vehicle help you with warnings, with active engagement when you can't sense it. But we're still in the mode of eyes on the road, hands on the wheel, engaged driver. That's the safe way to approach it.
Although, Steve, that's clearly a prototype, but how far away do you think we are from this kind of thing being more every day than it is now?
I think we're less than 10 years away. We got to remember, in 1958, Chevy had a Bel Air on their test track in Milford that was an autonomous car. 65, they were regular running vehicles. The difference between now and then is that the cost of all of this technology has come down. We've now got 64-bit processors. Even today, the common car has more than 40 processors, more than 100 million lines of code. It's becoming an electronic device. So now it's just a question of convergence. It's just a question of that engineering technology, and we're there.
Do you think there's a demand for a car that drives itself?
There's a demand, definitely demand. We know that there's going to be some people that are going to fight it, but it is those that are aging that's now going to give them mobility. You're going to take a look at a young person and say, you can drive an autonomous car and your insurance is $400 a year. You can drive the car yourself and your insurance is $3,000 a year. those sorts of things start to make the decision.
I know what
very
mom and
easy.
dad are going to say, right?
Absolutely.
What do you think?
It's a question of the demand versus the legality. What most people think when they talk of self-driving cars is they'll be able to sleep in the passenger seat, fall asleep have sex in the back seat, for God's sake, while the car drives.
David, family show, for God's sakes. Come on.
It was actually in a J.D. Power study. What can I say? But they think that they won't have to be behind the wheel. In fact, everybody I've talked to on the automotive side, automobile company side, has said that the driver still has to be behind the wheel to take the wheel in case of an emergency. So basically then you're stuck behind the wheel, not being able to text, not being able to read a book, not being able to fall asleep, but you're not actually doing anything.
Well, is that your understanding, Brian, of how this would work?
Well, again, it's building upon itself, right? So we have cruise control that we're all familiar with, we're comfortable with. We've just introduced adaptive cruise control.
What does that mean?
Adaptive cruise control has radar systems that can lock into the vehicle in front of you and adjust your speed on a highway to ensure you keep the certain gap distance from it.
Oh, so you don't have to adjust it yourself?
You don't have to adjust it yourself. That's available in our Cadillacs, our SRXs, CTSs, and so forth, the ATS. And then we're looking at introducing lane keeping. Lane keeping is an interesting technology which will actually look through the cameras. You know, the cameras and sensors are your eyes and your ears. It's your senses to the vehicle. And it looks at the lane markings and it centers you on the lane. Tying that with adaptive cruise control, you're braking the vehicle, you're centering it, and it's starting to drive for yourself. You're still engaged as a driver.
What happens if in this lane keeping thing you start to crowd the guy beside you? What happens?
Well, there's warning systems. It alerts you that the lane keeping can't accurately pick up the lane and will disengage, and it'll adjust for you. So
so if you fall asleep at the wheel or you start moving over, theoretically that's going to save you.
It's important for us to have the understanding of people behaviors, get the experience of these technologies in the car first, get the people used to it, make sure the demand's there, make sure that the comfort's there and that the vehicle's behaving correctly before you take the bigger leaps of fully automated systems.
Jim?
The technology we really need is a Canadarm hand that comes out of the steering column, smacks the driver in the face. I find it odd that I'm actually agreeing with David Booth on something, but in terms of the public acceptance, I think one of the self-driving features that we have seen is the automatic parking, where you drive by a parking spot, the car measures whether the hole is big enough for the car, and you stop the car, push a button, take your hands off the wheel, and the car steers you into the spot. Every car company offers that on some model, some as low as Ford Focus, I guess, is probably the cheapest car that has it. It was introduced by Lexus on the LS 400, their top-of-the-line flagship. When they replaced that car with a new generation, they didn't offer this system.
Why not?
They said the take rate, the number of people that chose it was very low, and the research showed people showed it to their friends once, never used it again. So
Steve, it does make you wonder that there's something clearly technologically cool about all of these innovations we've talked about today. But it's possible that at the end of the day, it just might be a cute, clever thing to show at an auto show, and people actually aren't going to go for it. That is possible.
I think the reality is, just to build on the point that's been made, it is an evolution. We have a reality autonomous cars on the road today that will keep you in the lane, that will not allow an accident that's going to stop you. We start to evolve, the driver's going to be in the seat. But you take a look, accidents alone cost us $2 billion in North America. About 85% of those are human error. If you can start to save $2 billion a year, if you can start to cut down, we have a new challenge within the automotive industry of 163 grams per mile of CO2 by 2025. Doesn't do you any good if you're parked on the Don Valley Parkway, stopped, you're wasting or you're producing a lot of greenhouse gases. So it's going to allow us to use roads more efficiently.
Complementary currencies have been around for decades, but what purpose do they serve? And when is a national currency not enough? Joining us now to shed light on these currencies in Brussels, Belgium via Skype, Bernard Lietaer. He is the author of Rethinking Money, How New Currencies Turn Scarcity into Prosperity. And Bernard, it's good of you to join us on TVO tonight. Let's just start with a very basic first principles kind of question. What is currency?
Well, it is not what economic textbooks say, which is usually the standard of value and a medium of exchange and a store of value. because that is what functions of money that currency plays, not the nature of money. Money is an agreement within a community to use something standardized as medium of exchange. That's my working definition.
Okay, and we know, for example, that dollars and euros and pounds and the list goes on. These are the things that we have agreed on will represent currency among us. What other kinds of currencies are there in use today? And if you would focus particularly on North America.
Well, one of the oldest was started in North America. It was the frequent flyer miles. These are commercial purpose currencies which try to encourage loyalty of customers to particular airline alliances. This started 40 years ago. What these systems have proven is that you can now start a payment system on a very large scale. This is a world system. And there are 15,000 billion miles around. So it's not marginal. And they do this very cheaply. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it at all.
How do you think currency goes from being an idea to something legitimate that everybody understands is on the level?
Well, it depends on what the purpose is to begin with. We have been trained to believe that a country needs only one currency. We've been doing this for a while. And now, with the information age, all kinds of new media of exchange are appearing. Not only commercial ones, but also social purpose ones. And more recently, the crypto coins and things like that have been appearing in the internet exclusively. So we have a whole monetary ecosystem that actually is emerging. And I think that is an opportunity, not a problem.
Okay, before we get to opportunity versus a problem, would you tell us whether you think it in fact is a problem for any particular country to have just a single type of currency?
Well, what we've been able to prove scientifically is that a monoculture, which that a single currency is a monoculture, is always unstable. So the instability of our monetary system, which has been going on for quite a while, actually since the beginning of the industrial age, we have had a lot of monetary and banking crisis, or national debt crisis, which are all related to the same issue. It's the same system that actually breaks down in different places.
Well, let me ask you about that stability, because if we were meeting at a coffee shop in Canada and we put down some money to pay for our coffee after we were done, that Canadian dollar, we know our government's good for that. Yes, it's been worth more or less over the years compared to its American counterpart. But when you say unstable, are you trying to express some concern about whether the government is good for it?
What I'm saying is just factually, between 1970 and 2010, the IMF has counted 425 crises in our monetary system. So that's more than there are countries, right?
One of the reasons we have you in here tonight, obviously, and we're talking about this now, is that Bitcoin has been in the news a lot lately and for all the wrong reasons. Mt. Gox, one of the largest Bitcoin exchanges, they lost 850,000 Bitcoins, then valued at $450 million. The company blamed the loss on a transaction malleability. What does that mean?
Well, one of the problems that Bitcoin suffers with is the secrecy that surrounds the origin of Bitcoin, the secrecy that surrounds the identification of the person that started this software structure, et cetera, has been so pervasive that it makes it difficult to give credibility to the way you look at this situation. And the particular circumstances that you're talking about cause some people to feel very uneasy about the length of time which Bitcoin is going to continue before it all comes crashing down. There's so many different angles to this story, whether it be a malfunction of the basic structure of how Bitcoins are mined, or it be the integrity of the people who authorized the transaction in terms of how you identify the different process of the Bitcoin mining.
I think that was it in this case. Yeah. There was a bug in the system that allowed, virtually speaking, as money moved from one virtual wallet to another virtual wallet, the thieves got in there and stole it.
Yes.
$450 million worth. That's a problem, I presume.
It is indeed.
And then last week, they shut down the Alberta-based Flexcoin. Now it's $600,000 in that case. It's not so much. But do they have a problem here?
Well, yes, they do.
I mean, beyond these one-off examples, is there a more structural problem here?
Well, there is indeed. And you also have the picture being posted of Satoshi Nakamura. Is that really the person, or is it a person that just happens to have the same name, and so on? So this all goes towards the credibility of the currency. When you look at other currencies around the world, they're associated with the sovereignty of a country and the economic base of that country and its buying and selling international trade. When Bitcoin doesn't have that as a background, it makes it problematic. So it's based on people believing that the way the coins are actually mined with people that use $20,000 computers is a credible process. And when these two instances that you explained happen, then it shakes that credibility.
It affects the credibility, sure. So can you talk a little more about what kind of an impact, when the Mt. Gox thing happened, which was a huge sum of money, what kind of impact did that have on the value of the currency after that took place?
Well, it dropped several $100s in one day. Now, it went down in the range of the 400s. I think it was around 470 or something like that. But today, I just checked my Onyx. It's up around 691. That's quite a bit of volatility, and people who are currency traders don't like that. I mean, the Canadian dollar doesn't go in that range. U.S. dollar, Japanese yen doesn't go in that range, proportionate to what it's used for. So that causes people some problems.
When a currency is entirely digital, is hacking inevitable?
Well, you can hack just about anything if you describe the word hacking as being able to figure out how something works. Now, when I said figure out how something works, one of the problems is the identification, who are the people that set out the structure of Bitcoin in the very beginning. This anonymity has become almost a legend in the community. And some people think it's kind of neat because it goes towards the credibility of the process, and they think that somebody hasn't got an axe to grind by faking it. On the other hand, because that can't be validated, then people are trying to ascertain the truth about the situation.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review. You can see all of those programs in their entirety. They're on our website, theagenda.tvo.org, on our iTunes channel, and on our YouTube channel, all there at youtube.com/theagenda.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.